Hey everybody. So yeah, I think we've learned a pretty valuable lesson. I think in general you should never really count on an API's ID as your ID. They can, you just never know what could come up. And like in this situation, I'm not able to easily convert from a spotlight to a uh, what is it? I want to call it a dot light, spotlight to a dot light. Uh, let's see, converting from a point light to a spotlight. When I convert those back and forth, I believe I have to create a whole new light, which then causes a whole new ID to be created. And that's all on the third party. But then I want to also be able to um, map create a dictionary that has an ID or a key to a light, and a unique identifier would be good for that. And it did, and using the ThreeJS one worked out great on the mesh, but it's not working on the light. Now, I think that with some thought early on, it would have been pretty obvious that you shouldn't use it. Like, it just doesn't take, you don't have to think very deeply to come up with a fairly like generic, hey, don't use somebody else's ID as your ID. And I've been thinking about like other reasons why this was going to end in tears. And one of the reasons was like eventually I'm going to do grouping, and I'm probably going to want to group by my own IDs, not by 3GS's IDs. Also, eventually I would like to add a physics engine to this. And whenever I create objects, sort of the I'll have like a 3GS object and then I'll have a physics object, and they'll both have IDs. What makes the 3GS ID the special ID? So really, this was going to end badly. Now, this is also the kind of like had I created like my own Showtime ID at the beginning, that would just be built deep into the very genetics of this application. But now that I'm 220 videos in, um, now I'm trying to basically shoehorn or bolt on whatever sort of analogy you want to use for that. But I'm going to basically artificially add this ID after the fact, and I do know like that it's going to be needed for everything. Right now, I use the 3GS ID for the scenes, for everything, for the meshes, the scenes, the cameras. Everything has its own, uses the 3GS ID, and I'm going to have to move those over into to be the um, to use the Showtime ID instead. And I have no idea like what the problems are going to be. And this actually could be the kind of thing that where I go, damn, I'm better off now that I'm done getting close to the end of my POC. Whenever I decide to go with MVC, minimum viable P product MVP, um, maybe I should build from scratch again, because I know if I built from scratch, I would immediately start with my own IDs at the beginning. But hey, what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna update the light to use my new IDs, deal with whatever the ripple effects of that are, and then like as I rotate through, uh, I will start to um, I will begin the process of updating the mesh and the cameras and the animations. And the scenes. I kind of wanted to wait and just see what actually forced me, but just for learning purposes. But I think it's very obvious that it's going to be a problem. Now, so in the last video, I created a new sequence generator thing with ChatGPT's help, and basically this is what it does. And um, um, the this is the code that basically will let me recycle IDs. I have actually worked. I know it's hard to imagine because the number is like in the billions or something, but I have actually worked at places where we got too big. Our numbers got too big for the integers in the browser, and like if you that problem was unfixable. Like we just had to come up with like a secondary ID or something like that. and it was real. It made the code garbage. So I definitely wanted the ability to recycle IDs, to avoid that, because I don't think I'll ever actually. Our problem is that we ended up having taking other shortcuts where we would add, um, like, in order to make sure that we never had an overlap between numbers, we were adding like 100,000 or a million in between them, and stuff like that. We just had all kinds of silly, shortcuts, instead of just kind of doing things right. So in this, as I add things, if I'm deleting something, I'm just gonna add those to the recycled IDs. So basically, anytime I decide I'm gonna delete something, I will call this recycle ID, and the next time I generate, if it finds that ID, it will use it. It's pretty clean, I think. We'll see. I mean, this would not be the first time ChatGPT led me wrong. So, but anyways, before I can do anything, I need to get uh, this service injected into my Three.js service. I only plan to use it ever in here, but if I do use it, I believe by default it's going to be a doing it this methodology, it'll be a singleton. So I won't have to worry about like doing anything special to make sure that I always use the same instance. I had figured out, like, I created a new instance of the service through some other way, and I think it was in this project, but it might have been in one of my other projects, uh, and ended up creating like where each one of them had their own instance, and that was a bit of a nightmare. Um, but and it's kind of cool that when you do stuff like that, because you remember it. Like, I probably wouldn't have remembered it and just kept making the same mistake over and over again. But it ended up being kind of a nightmare scenario. So now I remember clearly. I'm hoping for the blue error. Yep. So I think this means that it'll be able to. Yep. It could find it and injected it. So now I have my recycled sequence service over here. And so if I want to use that, then I can. But before I can do any of that stuff, I need to go into my light interface, and I need to add a new um, required um, attribute called showtime ID, and it's going to be required, and it's a number. And basically, in order to, when I first go to create one, what I'll do is I will, it's upset about this spot right here. So I think right here is, I just need to add, much like I did, um, I just add a one like that, right? -1. And then, so now I have one. And now, I believe it's actually interesting. I can't remember. I believe in the Three.js manager, when I add one, um, in the Three.js service, when I add let me copy this thing. Control add light. Okay, so I add a light, and then I go to this. Oh, okay. So when I go to the light service and I add the light, so I'm actually going to need access to this recyclable service over there, not here. I don't think I need it here. But so that means that I'm going to need it in all the like services. So I'll need it in the mesh service. I'll need it in the camera service. Everybody will need it, and I have to just double, triple check when that happens, that it ends up being that it's a singleton, that they all share the same service. I don't I don't think that's going to be a problem. I think that's, I don't think it's a problem that it's a private. Okay. So this, okay, so now when I go to add a light, um, but okay, so sometimes point light to spotlight. So if existing light is equal to undefined, then push light item, new point light, new 3 light, and then so basically I think at this point I know that this is a new light, that it's not existing light. So I could just say light item dot stid is equal to this dot recycle sequence service dot generate ID. And so I should get a new one. Cannot find inject. So I kind of have two choices to fix that. I can just type that in here. I know it comes from the core, so I can just type in inject. And that's probably the safest way to do it. You might use some sort of third party, and if you like just kind of moused over and use the injector, which would be fine, but it is possible that you have some other third party thing that also has an inject, and I've seen that bug happen before. Let's just see, add mesh. I guess what we should do is also, let's see, in our light service, when we delete the light, right, delete light item. So this dot recycle sequence service dot recycle ID. So basically we'll just put it back onto the stack to be used. And then let's see, so that should do it, I think. So basically now I should have light. I guess I know this video is too long, isn't it? 13, it's not terrible, not terrible. Let's go to the ThreeJS service, their ThreeJS light manager component. And so, okay, so I guess, yeah, I need to add it to the form, and then everywhere where basically I have an ID or I'm doing anything with the ID, there's probably a good way to look for it. But everywhere, Control F. So everywhere where I have an ID, I probably need to add my showtime ID and add a form control and everything, and then in the template, sort of, I guess wherever I show the ID, maybe put a slash, and then I wonder. Maybe I don't need to do that because I don't know if it needs to be part of the. I don't know if ID is. Let's see. I'm just curious now. I don't know if it's part of the form or if it's or if that's actually part of the. Oh yeah. So there's our showtime ID. Um, so now this can be the key to our form. It should be safe. It should not change whenever I change something from like if I change this to a spotlight. See the ID the ThreeJS ID changed, but the the Showtime ID stayed the same. So that should be a good key for the forms. Yeah, not that exciting. I don't know. Not everything is, although I do feel like I've grown as a developer. Um, I think the way I'm doing things is kind of like coding in super slow mo because I have to use words, human English words for uh, for every line of code that I write, um, and that in itself, like if I'm just heads down, just in the zone coding, that's a whole different experience than like talking through code changes. Um, so this becomes like super slow mo. So now I can kind of understand some of the fine details that maybe I couldn't understand and speak to before, um, which I think makes me a better developer and definitely a better communicator, and probably a better interviewer. Um, so although I'm very happy with my job, so I definitely don't want to send out any negative vibes about my current employment situation. I'm definitely loving my LMS job for the state of Georgia. But anyways, everybody, happy coding. Bye.